There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. May I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed via the internet, and that recording will be archived for future viewing. Please could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid background noise and any feedback. Please use the raise hand function if you wish to speak, and please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not by the chat function. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth, for that. Well, good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
None provided in advance of the meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Item 2 then, the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of September 2023, and their pages on the matter itself, 326 to 338. And they're a matter for correctness only. Someone prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's carried. Item 3 then of the agenda to receive any declaration of interest and nature of such interest under the Code of Conduct. Good evening, Councillor Prothero. Are there any?
Evening, Chair. Sorry, I'm a little bit late.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. There are none. Item 4 then on the agenda is the annual safeguarding update, which went to Cabinet on the 7th of September 2023 for us to consider. Mr. Carver.
I'm happy to introduce the report if you'd like me to.
That's very good. Thank you. Yes, please.
Sorry, I broke up there. Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's a referral from Cabinet. The report provides an annual update of what we've done in terms of our corporate safeguarding activity. There's a corporate safeguarding group that's made up of officers from across the council that sits and meets regularly in order to make sure that the council stays abreast of any changes that may be required to ensure that we're fully compliant with our corporate safeguarding responsibilities. The annual report is attached to the Cabinet report there and is sent round to all scrutiny committees to make sure that members far and wide, I suppose, have oversight of this area and have the opportunity to ask any questions. Usually I would ask the relevant director or head of service from the committee to present the report, but I think given audit is cross-cutting across the council, I thought it was probably made sense that I came today to be here to answer any questions that you may have. Clearly it is built around the 4 directorates as they were at the time that the report was prepared, and so that's where the activity has taken place, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah, thank you, Lance, very kind. Are there any questions, anyone? Nigel?
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the report, Lance, and that introduction. That was really good summary. Thank you. So just 2 quick questions. I appreciate that one of them is quite detailed, so obviously you may not have the answer to hand, but right at the start under the social services section, there was an element around increased participation from parents was noted who had not previously engaged by doing it on remote meetings through the pandemic. And then immediately underneath that, it says that they're now moving back to in-person meetings, and that as a minimum, parents and carers and others, but parents will need to be in those meetings as well. So I just wondered whether we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot there. I realise there's a benefit of both elements. Obviously, having them in place is really in person is really important, but I just wondered if there was any learning from that, and whether that could be whether there was any sort of thing we could take forward about making sure we got the benefits of both worlds if possible in that one. And the second question, there's only 2, so it was on 2 pages later, which was regarding 823 reports, 302 proceeded to inquiry, and of those 70% were completed within the 7 working day timescale. Those out of timescale were usually only by a few days. I suppose my question would be, were there any that were significant outliers, and was there any reason that they were significantly over? And therefore, again, is there any learning from that in making sure that we were keeping mostly to those days. It was just those two. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel.
Okay, I can probably respond to the first one. The second one, I may have to come back to you just to get the exact detail. But in terms of the first one, I think the advantage of being able to look people in the eye and read body language and so on, and unwritten, I suppose, unsaid communication is probably far more valuable than we would really. I suppose it's so valuable that actually we would make sure that we wanted that over and above everything else, which is why the decision has been made. So I think it outweighs it. In terms of the statistics, I will have to come back to you.
Okay, Nigel.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? No, I've got two questions, Lance. First one in regards to the social services issues and the statistics about 55 initial on the top of the page. They're not paginated, that's the difficulty here. Top of the page, 55 initial child protection conferences held during the period, which resulted in 151 children becoming subject to the child protection register. Does that figure include looked after children? Or children looked after?
Yes, it would do potentially.
Okay, so clearly not everyone on the register is looked after, and I'm just wondering whether there's any requirement sort of to indicate how many children looked after there is in that figure, because whilst the safeguarding provisions I think are very important, I think for you as a social services department moving forward, is this change in Welsh Government legislation that any child that's put into residential care or whatever, my understanding is that the Welsh Government is saying that from 2027 it can only go into premises which are not profit making. They have to be social enterprise. And I'm just concerned how that's going to impact local authority, certainly in the Vale and the local authorities moving forward, if there's no capacity in the system. And given the current budget issues, which every local authority's got, is that going to put the social services budget into some difficulty? So that's the first question. Second question is on the Corporate Resources Directorate, Safe Recruitment. And that's sort of, 5-6 pages in. Members' disclosure and barring services checks. Given this is a report given this is the annual report from April 22 to March 23, the final paragraph says there that an audit was undertaken in November 22. 5 out of 54 elected members had yet to complete their form, including one member that required an enhanced check. There were also 7 DBS checks that remain incomplete. But we then got a date of August 23, which is obviously outside the report period. So I think whether or not that should be clarified to say, as at the 31st of March 2023, there were X number of members outstanding, and obviously that can presumably then be picked up in next year's report. But it also doesn't tell you what the position is. It just says all elected member checks were processed, but it doesn't give any outcome. So you can stick the process in, you can stick your DBS check in, which meant, oh great, we've met the criteria, but actually the DBS hasn't come back yet with any information. So I'm just wondering whether that can be sort of clarified or addressed, given that August is 23 is beyond the period of this report. That's it.
Yeah, I suppose I'll start with that one if that's okay. I attempted to address it by giving an up-to-date position, and that was the point that I prepared this report. So I was conscious that producing an annual report with, I suppose, a gap in it, or the one that shows a highlighted gap in terms of member DBSs, was going to ask questions. So I ensured that what I provided in the accompanying report was the most up-to-date position, which I'm pleased to say is that all members have had those checks. I'm not aware that any members' checks have come back with anything that is of
Okay.
concern. I would assume that I would have been made aware of that if that was the case. The figures, I suppose, around child protection registrations and so on, are perhaps and conferences don't relate directly to the number of children looked after. And I suppose your question really was around children looked after and the different sort of accommodation that they may be in. There are two different types that would be seen as potentially profit making types of accommodation, and they relate to independent fostering arrangements. So that's where I suppose a fostering company has found the foster carer, and we've placed that individual in fostering. The other one relates to a residential facility usually, and to give you an idea of those figures, they tend to be, I mean, it varies all the time, but they tend to be between 10 and 15 for the Vale of Glamorgan. So, and the Vale has some of its own provision and is in the process of building or has provision that is coming online that is going to be provided by third sector organisations, hopefully later this year. So it is likely to present us with some challenges, particularly around the independent fostering. I am now less concerned about what would happen with the residential, although we have some individuals who are placed in profit-making residential properties who are very well placed. Yeah. And the what we would have to do in 2027 is yet to be clear. Okay. My expectation is that there would be some exemptions to allow perhaps for a child to stay in accommodation, because it wouldn't seem right to move them just for that reason.
That's okay.
But we'll have to see what happens, I guess.
No, that's okay, Lance. It's just useful information, really, because to destroy a placement which is working extremely well is so hopefully the Welsh Government will look at the exemptions for you. So no, but thank you for that. Thanks for those explanations. If there are no other questions, any comments? If there are no comments, then the recommendation is presumably that committee note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. A seconder, Councillor Hooper. Thank you very much. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. That's carried. I don't know whether you're staying with us, Lance. Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Next item on the agenda is the final draft Vale of Glamorgan Council Annual Self-Assessment Report. Tom, before you come in, there has been an additional paper circulated by Gareth at 4 o'clock. So I don't know whether all elected members have received it, because those who were in, I assume, the planning committee or whatever it was may not have picked it up. But there is an additional paper that Gareth circulated, which has come from Cabinet itself. So you may want to pick that up, Tom, if anyone's, but I think it just addresses the point in regards to the comments made by our committees, really.
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. As you say, Gareth helpfully circulated earlier on today the minute from Cabinet at their consideration last week of this report, which is the final draft of the self-assessment, and that reference gives members of this committee an overview of the discussions at Cabinet, and I'll try and take you through some of those, if I may now, Chair. Members will remember that we brought this report in its draft state to your committee alongside the other scrutiny committees earlier on in September, October. We're now bringing it back to your committee, Chair, because you have a specified duty under the Local Government and Elections Act in terms of scrutinising this particular report. So the report has been referred to you by Cabinet today. If you have any comments following the presentation and consideration of the report, Cabinet will consider those again. If the committee has no comments, the report will just be referred straight on to full council for their consideration in November. So members will be aware that the self-assessment is an important part of the new Local Government and Elections Act introduced in 2021. This is the second of the self-assessments that we've undertaken as a local authority. And we've got a requirement as part of doing that self-assessment to produce the self-assessment, to then consult on it and then bring it back to Cabinet and to yourselves in respect of each financial year. Because this is the second of the self-assessments, we've also got a duty to reflect on progress made in the first of the self-assessments. So Appendix A provides committee with an updated version of the final draft of the self-assessment. There are a couple of important changes, I suppose, to highlight since your committee saw this report last. Firstly, some amendments have been made to the areas of future focus. That's in response to the consultation. That consultation was really wide-ranging. It involved all scrutiny committees alongside your committee, the council staff, our partners, the trade unions, and we also sought the views of the public and of businesses as well. And where we've suggested comments or changes to the findings, they're highlighted for ease, Chair, in red throughout Appendix A. Appendix B has been included within the report, and that's the consultation summary, which shows you both the committee's views, so those of scrutiny and your committee, but also then any views of the public and other partners, along with what we've done to address those. I think it's important to remind members that this is a self-assessment in terms of how well we've done in delivering our commitments within the annual delivery plan, and then to identify areas of future improvement for the next annual delivery plan in 2024-25. Throughout the report, we've included reference to engagement and consultation activities aligned with each of the four wellbeing objectives, and then within Appendix B, the overall summary of the findings from our consultation exercises. The early findings from the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey, which I mentioned at committee, I think, when presenting the draft, has seen nearly 1,800 residents complete the survey. That's just over 2,000 now as at today. We also reflect some of the social media sentiment within that report, as well as, I say, the views of the scrutiny committees. I've asked for the team to do a final analysis of the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey and to present that to Cabinet with a reference to Corporate Performance and Resources Committee in the winter. We will also publish the full data set associated with that particular survey. But within the report, you can see some headline findings from that survey. It shows that the top concern of residents is the cost of living crisis. Just over 3/4 indicated that, and then nearly 3/4 about support and services for older people, followed by 2/3 indicating that the nature emergency was of concern to them. And that's encouraging in the sense that aligns with the council's critical challenges, which are in our current annual delivery plan. We also asked residents to prioritise the amenities that were most important to them, and within that section, access to health and care services, a clean and tidy neighbourhood, and the ability to buy or rent a good quality home were the top three priorities for respondents. We then asked a series of questions about the council itself. We asked whether residents were aware of who their local councillor is, and about half of respondents indicated that they knew who that individual or those individuals were. And we asked then about awareness of responsibilities of councillors. We then asked whether residents to indicate whether they agreed or disagreed with a number of statements about the council. And here 27% of respondents stated that they slightly or strongly agreed that the council's services are of a high quality, with nearly half of respondents slightly or strongly disagreeing with that. Nearly a quarter of respondents slightly or strongly agreed that the council acts in the interests of local of local residents. And when we asked about whether the council takes residents' views into account when making decisions, nearly 15% of respondents slightly or strongly agreed with that statement versus 64% strongly or slightly disagreeing with it. So we've taken into consideration the views of our residents that were expressed in that survey. It's important to say that it's not necessarily a representative sample of residents, but it is an important survey nonetheless. And we've looked at that plus the feedback from scrutiny committees. And what committee will see in the report itself is that we've strengthened the areas of future focus in direct response to those findings. And we've also reviewed and revised the overall engagement score within the self-assessment from good to fair. Within the appendix, you'll also see a list of the recommendations and considerations of scrutiny committees with full responses as to what's been done against each of those within the report itself. And as I say, your committee chair have a specified role in contributing to this process. So we've highlighted within that Appendix B the 10 areas of consideration that you asked for at your previous meeting and what we've done to address those. So within the overall context of all of that, we believe that on balance, we've met the annual delivery plan commitments in 2022-23. It was a challenging year, but we've attributed a judgment of good, reflecting the achievement over 85% of those activities and the performance targets. And the second element of judgment in terms of the use of resources, again, we've assigned a good status because we've got good evidence to show that those resources have been used economically, efficiently, effectively, and importantly, equitably to support our performance as well. So that's a bit of an overview, Chair. Obviously, I'm happy to take any questions that your members may have.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Just to say, it was good to see that all the comments picked up in our last meeting were considered by the Cabinet and has been considered by yourself, and they're obviously contained in the appendices. So that was good to see. So thank you for that. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tom. I'm picking up on some of the issues. Excuse the dog. Picking up on some of the issues that we talked about last time. But before we do that, the note that Gareth sent out earlier referenced the Cabinet minute. And it was interesting in the way that it actually went through the minutes. And if you just bear with me a second, Chair, when I get up on my phone. It said the Governance and Audit Committee considered the report at its meeting on the 18th of September and felt the report was easily accessible given the level of detail and information required. That was the comment of Councillor Prothero, and whether or not I agree with all the rest of the committee, it wasn't clear. That was just one member's view. My point later on actually suggested that there was some complexity in it, so you could argue it was perhaps the counter view. And I'm just wondering whether the Cabinet are picking and choosing some of these comments, because that doesn't really reflect on the way that the scrutiny committee should be reflected. So as a first point, I'd be interested in your take. I also, and then I'm really pleased the way you've rewritten the Project Zero commitments, because I think that highlights some of the concerns that this committee had, and not the last meeting, the meeting prior to that, we raised our concerns about Project Zero. So I'm pleased that that's been reflected in it. You also, though, again, and Tom, we spoke about this briefly last time, and in the first critical challenge, in the first paragraph, we still reference the economic effects and uncertainty associated with Brexit. And I think unless you're specific about things like that, that's just it's a politicized comment. It might well be a comment I agree with at a political level, but in this sort of document here, I'm not sure it's appropriate without further depth, and there is still no further depth that I could see in it. And the last point, Chair, is just the relation to, we still talk, and I just need to find out where it is exactly. We talk about the council having developed its hybrid facilities for members' meetings. For that to be in a report today, when we can't come in and have a hybrid meeting today, I think is farcical. And the fact that this was brought up by a scrutiny committee, and I think it was clear, so I don't think there was any ambiguity about that. And for that line to stay in either shows you're not really caring about what scrutiny committees say, or you just don't care about the truthfulness of this, because it isn't true. We still don't have committees that are properly hybrid, and that goes throughout the whole council, so through to full council meeting. So I'd welcome your view on those points. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I was busy trying to type those up to take. In terms of the comments at Cabinet, I think that's probably a question for the leader in terms of the presentation of the report. In terms of the accessibility issue and how easy it is to read and digest for a wide range of audiences. And this is something that came up in a number of different scrutiny settings as well. It is a tough ask to produce a really detailed report that goes into the level of detail required, but also to make it accessible and consumable to a wide range of audiences. And one of the things that we have been doing is working on a summary version of the self-assessment that we'll publish once it's finalised. We'll also chunk it down, if you like, into bite-sized pieces that we'll then use to promote through things like our social media feed, so that in effect we've got individual consumable items showing what the council has been working on. And it is always a real challenge to try and get the balance of these kind of reports right. In terms of the comment around Project Zero, thank you for welcoming the redrafting of that. I think it shows the genuine value of bringing it through the committees and having a wide range of different views on the subject. And it was something that was useful for us to reflect on. I take the point to an extent in terms of the critical challenge and the Brexit reference. As you're aware, we continue to have Brexit as one of the corporate risks on the register, where we're reporting to members, this committee and to Cabinet, in terms of the effects that we're seeing. They are increasingly difficult to disaggregate from the macroeconomic effects that we're seeing, but that's the reason for including that reference. The point around hybrid facilities for members' meetings, I've just had a look at there are two references. I asked for the second to be inserted into the report following the points of discussion at your committee last chair, and what we've looked to do is put that position statement in context. So we're saying that we want to embed our use of integrated hybrid meeting technology to improve democracy in line with public participation priorities, which I think reflects Councillor Hooper's point. I do accept the point that the wording in terms of introduce policies and new technology to support the council is maybe not as precise as it needs to be. And I'm very happy if your committee want to make a recommendation to Cabinet that we tighten up the wording on that. I think what we're driving at there is that we've got the policies and we're in an advanced stage of implementing the technology to support it. But I take the point that Councillor Hooper makes. So I think that addresses the half a dozen points.
Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, can I just come back on, Tom, with regard to the Brexit point? This committee has previously asked for Brexit to be taken out of the as a separate risk. So we're, I think, pretty united that if you can't disaggregate it, then I think it needs to fit into its core risk. So I think that's something, again, I'm talking in my personal capacity as a member of the committee, but it's something this committee has been clear on now for the past 6 or 7 months or so. So I think that point needs referencing. And tighten up wording is one thing, Tom, but this is just not true. We haven't developed this solution. So I think this needs to be, tightening it up is I'd use different terminology. I completely redo that sentence and make it appropriate, because we're, as you know, one of the only councils in the country that currently doesn't meet in a true hybrid capacity. And I think that's something that shouldn't be hidden away from. So I think we need to be clear on that particular point. But thank you for the other responses.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. Where to begin? Number one, I'll ask about agency staff. So this committee asked for more detail around agency staff, its percentage, what's being paid, and that hasn't been included. I think that's, other than the Brexit point, the only other point that hasn't been addressed from this committee in this new revised report. So I'd like some clarification, because I don't find anything in the appendices as to why this hasn't been clarified. Secondly, I'd like to reiterate on Project Zero. Absolutely, I think that the critical challenge has been modified so that it's a lot more clear and it's a lot more honest about the position we are actually in. And I thank you for your work on that, and the whole team, and also on the public engagement. And I do really look forward to seeing the full data sets, seeing the full outcomes of the public opinion survey. I think this has been extremely healthy, because I think it's putting us in an honest position as to where we actually are. The data is, from this snapshot at least, very different to what it has been for a very long time in public opinion surveys that have been done in the past, and I've been feeling that as being the case for a while now. So seeing that on paper is quite nice, and hopefully we can really improve because of that. So I look forward to the work that's being done in future. I do have to ask, though, to some extent, considering the stark nature of what we found in the public opinion survey, I know it's not fully representative yet. I know we're not done yet with it. There are only two real conclusions that we can come to for that, is that either one, people we're not communicating with properly, we're not listening to properly, and people aren't getting our side of the story as to what's going on, the challenges that we're facing, and that is makes communication a critical challenge, just the same as cost of living or Project Zero, because that is a key part of what we're doing here, is communicating with residents. Or number two, it would make the self-assessment that we are doing, that we are concluding that we are doing well, we have a good rating overall, is wrong. So one of the two is the case, and I'm more likely to say that the communication is off myself. So perhaps this is something that should not really be addressed in this annual report, but something to be considered for the next annual report, is should we include public engagement as a critical challenge, because this is showing the true flaws in what we've been doing for the past 4 years or so, that has changed over time as the world has changed around us and we haven't changed quite as quickly to it, perhaps. So I'd like your thoughts on that, really.
Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. Tom?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. While you were talking, I was trying to find the reference to some further information around agency staffing, and if I can't during this item, I'll make sure that that's provided to you as committee members. And just as some further reassurance on the use of agency staff, I've asked the HR team to start a review of our use of agency staff, especially important in light of our budget situation currently. But I'm aware that it's obviously of interest to elected members. It's been brought up at this committee, and we've had a council question as well. In terms of the public opinion survey and the emerging findings, I think the challenge for me, I think the first thing that is really important is that we do that full and thorough analysis as a standalone report. Once we close the survey down, it's going to be really important to really get under the skin of that data, and also to do that by looking at different demographics, and also then to supplement the general public survey with some more detailed focus group work as well, if we've got areas of our communities that are underrepresented in terms of the response sample. So I think getting the baseline data is really, really important. I think as well, the big learning for us as a team has been the self-assessment is assessing ourselves in terms of how have we delivered the commitments that we've set out in the annual delivery plan and within our service plans. We then asked residents what they think of the services and the interaction with the council more broadly. And I think the read across there is where we need to give some real consideration to that public sentiment. And I think it highlights for me the importance of having some really clear service plan actions within next year's performance framework, so that they are front and centre then in terms of the self-assessment report that we go on to publish in this time next year. I think there is also an opportunity for us to look at how we reflect on the engagement sections within the self-assessment report more broadly, and importantly, how we then use some of this data to inform those areas of future focus. And members will see some of those highlighted in red throughout the report are directly in response to communicating what the council does, how we have to prioritise services and spending, and that's, I think, the holy grail of how we communicate what a local authority needs to do for the 130,000 odd residents that we have in the Vale.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Goodjohn again.
Yeah, can I quickly come back in on that?
Yeah.
Because I totally understand the points that you're making, and I agree with them. And in fact, it's very good, the further public engagement that we're doing, because that hasn't been done in the past for some years. And so that this is now happening again is extremely healthy, in my opinion. I think that there is something to note, though, with the self-assessment, that we are going through the annual delivery plan. We are deciding how have we done on each of the targets, and that's done over the course of the year, and that's great, and that's a really crucial part. But then we are then synthesizing that with the numbers that we have overall, judging not just the performance indicators but other judgments as to how we're doing as an authority, and then we're synthesizing that with public opinion, and we're coming to a conclusion of how well are we using our resources. And it's fair enough to say, well, maybe we haven't gotten the right service plan delivery points, maybe we need to be more clear with them, maybe, you know, this has been slightly out of line, so we can't properly judge based on the annual delivery plan, and that's fine to say, but we are coming to a conclusion of our resources as a whole. It's not just of the annual delivery plan. So I do think there needs to be recognition of that, and say I personally think that this is a far more honest assessment already, with just small changes, relatively small changes that have been done to Project Zero, to public engagement. I think has really improved the document. It's just to say that we are deciding how our resources are doing as a whole, and that needs to be an honest assessment and not simply based on the annual delivery plan.
Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. Tom? Happy with that?
Yeah, I think Councillor Goodjohn makes a good point, and I suppose what it also highlights is that what's visible, important to residents is really, really important for us to hear and take into consideration when we're setting our priorities, when we're setting our spending plans. And it's doing that alongside a whole host of statutory duties as well, that not all residents may necessarily have to use those particular services, but that we need to take them into the mix. And I, for some reassurance, certainly as part of the setting of the annual delivery plan, we ran a session with Cabinet, played this information back to them, and also in our early discussions now around formulating the financial strategy, this is the kind of intelligence that we're using as part of a whole mix of different things to look at how we can prioritise the things that are really important to residents, at the same time as having to protect those kind of very vital services that may not be used by all residents of the Vale.
Thank you, Tom. And Councillor Goodjohn, I didn't know whether you'd seen that additional Cabinet minute which set out the agency spend.
I didn't see that in the minutes, but I will go and look for it now. Thank you so much, Chair.
It basically says council spends 198.951 million on employee salaries, schools and non-schools. The total spend on agency contracts was 15.8 million, 9.3 million on schools and 6.5 million on non-schools.
That's great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
I'd be interested as to why that was not decided to be included in the annual self-assessment. I'm just interested as to the reasoning. Otherwise, that's fine.
Okay, it came out in that additional paper. You may have been in another meeting, so
Yes, no, thank you. I see it now. I've opened up the document. Thank you so much.
that's okay.
And purely a matter of timing, Councillor John, in terms of getting that information up to date. But we can certainly reflect it in the final version of the self-assessment.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is still related to agency staff. I'm sorry, Tom. So we now have got the figures. We know the breakdown, and it is quite a high amount of money to be spending on agency. And I think maybe a separate piece of work, as you've suggested, but we really do need to drill down to, because this is value for money, isn't it? Where are we spending on agency, and why? What are the reasons why we've had to rely on agencies so much? I think that's quite relevant. And in terms of engagement and how we can get more information out of our residents, I'm pretty confident going forward with the work that you're doing, strengthening communities, that we will get more information from our residents and for our residents to inform how we're doing going forward. So, but I'm a little bit concerned with agency staff because it's quite high. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Are there any other questions from anyone? No. I think on the agency point, Tom, no doubt that will have to be another piece of work, but it can be picked up, obviously, within the report. If there are no other questions, any comments from anyone? No comments. I think just a comment from me in regards to the public engagement and the communication part, Tom, and the point you were making. I think and whether you do it or not, I haven't seen any of the consultation or the public engagement, but whether it's important to advise residents, I would have thought, as to what money is allocated to which service directorates and what you can actually play about with in reality, because obviously you've got your statutory functions of social services, education, and by the time you take that out, I think somewhere in the region of 64% or 70% of your budget is gone. So it may be that the public are completely unaware as to what you spend your money on and where, and what actually you have any discretion over whatsoever. So I didn't know. I'm sure you do it. If you don't, then obviously it's a point to be picked up. But just that, Tom. That's all I was thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good point, and you put it far more eloquently than I was attempting to, Chair. Yes, 75% of the council's budget is spent on social care and education, and that leaves 25% to do all the other things. Certainly as part of the developing financial strategy and budget proposals, we've started to have some discussions around how can we communicate that. Colleagues in education and social services continue to do what they can to manage the pressures within those areas of the council spend, and are doing that really, really well. But it does highlight, as you say, the latitude or lack of it that we have for some of the other services. So it's how do we communicate that as part of this overall process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prothero.
I'm just agreeing with what Tom has said. It's absolutely essential that our residents understand that, for example, with visible services, it's like 8 or 9% of our total budget. So hardly any money at all to spend on all of those things that people see and complain about, like potholes and roads and stuff. So yeah, I think that's essential that they understand how we have to prioritise our money so that they can appreciate then the service they get from very little left.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. Just backing up what Councillor Prothero has said, actually, people only appreciate the services they use. They don't appreciate the services they don't use, and they want to know why more money isn't spent on X, Y, Z, whatever it is they're using. So they do not appreciate that there is a wider world out there that does not revolve around potholes and street signs and people's hedges. And I think we have to get this over to people that, you know, just because it's important to them, it isn't important to the rest of the Vale per se. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. I'm sure Tom will pick that up in moving forward, but it's very relevant. I think lots of people are completely unaware of all the services the local authority provides, and maybe it's time to list. I think it's something like 475 different services you provide. You know, so take social service education at the top. Then when you get down to the bottom, you know, things like births, deaths and marriages and all the Cinderella services that people are not aware of. So yeah, I think it's very important. Okay, if there's no other comments, then we need a recommendation. So what I was going to propose is that the recommendation be that we note the contents of the report, however, refer the following for comment to Cabinet, namely accessibility of the self-assessment report. 3, the issue regarding Brexit. Number 3, looking at hybrid meetings. And again, I'd endorse what Councillor Hooper says. I find it quite bizarre that I sit on this committee and it's all hybrid, all online. But I sit on 2 other authorities where it's a hybrid meeting and they've had no real issues. And I'm looking at exactly the same screen as I do in my other meetings, where there's a list of members on the side who wish to attend at home or otherwise, and others in the chamber. So I think there is some urgency there, looking at trying to get it back into the chamber and hybrid. The next one is public engagement and communication. And I think the last one is agency staff. So if those matters can be referred to Cabinet for a relook, Tom, and if members are happy to support that, then hopefully that's picked up all the points made this evening. I'm sure both Gareth and yourself can tweak them as necessary. Okay, someone prepared to move then? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you. That's carried. The next item is the Q2 update, Audit Wales Work Programme and Timetable 23-24. Vale de Morgan. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Yes, so just to say, I don't propose to go through this item in any detail, as I know I can see there's a very comprehensive covering report, and since the last committee meeting on the 18th of September, I think very little has changed.
Yeah.
But also my financial audit colleagues, they gave their apologies but asked me to provide a very brief update to the committee regarding the financial audit work. So just to say that with regard to our audit of the 22-23 financial statements, we are on track to complete our audit by the November deadline. And then with regard to our work on the annual grant claims, our audit certification work has started and we will be confirming completion deadlines with the council shortly. So then just to signpost, in terms of the performance audit work programme, the only thing I'd really like to add is the fact that the 22-23 draft report use of performance information with a focus, a very long-winded title, with a focus on service user feedback and outcomes, that was actually issued as a draft last Friday. And then scrolling towards the end of the report, I just wanted to signpost, I know I did refer to quite a few of the reports that were published, but this does give a full list of the 7 reports that were published in September. Just also to mention a couple of good practice events scheduled before Christmas. And there's also, again, to signpost a podcast on auditing community resilience. So that's all I was proposing to say. So thank you, Chair. If there are any questions.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Any questions, anyone? Any comments? No, only one from me, Samantha, and it's I should have picked it up before, but hopefully it'll slip the timescale. Is the thematic review of financial sustainability. There's a timetable now, which is performance audit work, sorry.
Yes.
The timetable there is March to June 24. I'm just wondering whether that is able to slip into sort of April, May, because obviously most councils will be setting their budget. Will have set their budget in February. At the I think it's at the latest, and to start it in March, because lots of them don't get approved until early March. Given the financial difficulties of local authorities and possible going forward, that wouldn't it be a little bit better to give councils a little bit more time, because obviously they're going to be working hard to balance the books and put a balanced budget together, rather than have Audit Wales coming in sort of just as they're sort of completing that, giving them a bit of breathing space. So I didn't know whether that could be looked at.
No, definitely. That's a very, very welcome point, and that is noted. And just to say that those timescales suggested in the report at the moment for next year are estimates, but that's very helpful. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, and the other one is in regards to the good practice exchange events and resources. Is that open to any member, or is it open to lay members or wherever?
Right, that's a really good point. There is an opportunity with, I think, a link in the report and an email address, so members can establish if that is the case, because I know that there will be some variation between the events.
Yeah, okay, because obviously it may be useful for lay members as well. I should imagine all the members get to see this, but certainly lay members, there may be some resource events there which it would be useful to pop along to get some more information.
And I did test the links and they do work.
Okay, so if anyone's interested, get on the link. Right, Nigel.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a comment on the detail in the report. I just found it really useful, especially the refresher of the previous publications. So I do find myself looking at questions sometimes and just thinking, oh, is there any more information on this? And you can just go back through and see those reports and obviously get to them as well. So I just wanted to say I thought it was a really clear and useful document. I know we see it relatively regularly, but it's always useful to see that refresher. So thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. If there are no other comments, no, the recommendations there then are that we note the contents of the report and the report be referred to Cabinet for their oversight. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Nigel. Seconder, Councillor Hooper. Thank you. Anyone against? Please show. No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.
You can stay if you wish.
I would, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda then is the progress against external regulatory recommendations, proposals for improvement. Number 7.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. So this is your mid-year review of these recommendations. Committee will be aware that we get a series of regulatory recommendations from colleagues at Audit Wales and the other regulators, and they are the result of either local pieces of work, and this builds on the report that Samantha just presented. So either local pieces of work to the Vale of Glamorgan or national pieces of work that Audit Wales do that we are responsible for responding to. When we receive one of those reports, we take it through the relevant scrutiny committee onto your committee in terms of the management response, and the actions against each of those recommendations are then monitored by the Council Strategic Insight Board on a regular basis. The reason for bringing this report to you mid-year, Chair, is for oversight of the regulatory recommendations that have been made. The report itself provides you with an overview of the 27 recommendations that are the result of national work. 26 of those are attributed a green status, 1 an amber status. There are 26 local recommendations. 20 of those have got a green status, indicating that they're on track. 5 have got an amber status, showing there's minor slippage. 1 has got a red status. The report has an appendix for you. This is the version of the tracker that we use at the Strategic Insight Board, indicating the responsible officer, what the recommendation is, what the update is, and what the status is of each of those recommendations are. I've asked my colleague Andrew Trewick to join me at committee this evening. Andrew's responsible for the one local recommendation, which is highlighted in your pack with reference LR 17. That's a recommendation that has been made as a result of some work on the Welsh Housing Quality Standard Review, which is attributed to red status. So if committee members had any particular comments on that one, Andrew would be able to answer them. But otherwise, happy to take any questions or comments from committee members.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from anyone? Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for this, Tom. I guess as a general question, there's a lot of recommendations in here, and I want to be sure which ones I should be worried about. I understand the status is probably whether it's on track or not, but have they been risk prioritized? Do they follow risk priority order, or for your mind, are they all pretty much equal?
Thank you, Matthew. The recommendations that are made by Audit Wales and the other regulators give us the opportunity then in that management response to indicate what action we're going to take, and also to set a priority date for responding to them. So where we would see, as part of formulating that management response, is at that stage that we do that risk assessment process. So if there was a particularly time sensitive or urgent response, we would clearly prioritise that with an earlier response date than other actions that may take a little bit longer and would be less of a priority to implement. However, the response to regulatory recommendations is something as an authority we do take very seriously. It's the reason for it being a regular item on the Strategic Insight Board's agenda, to keep real visibility on this work, because the findings of colleagues at Audit Wales are really obviously important for us to respond to appropriately.
Thanks, Tom. Sorry, Chair, if you wouldn't mind, and certainly my insinuation wasn't that none of them are not taken seriously. I guess from a lay member's perspective, some of those, especially the national ones, would impact the council more. And you might have one that's a very high priority where you think actually that's a significant weakness for us as a council, but the work might take longer. So I mean, I might be on my own, but I find it useful to get a view of the highest priority ones we look at, where that we really should be keeping a track on a regular basis, versus those that actually we're just kind of happier plodding along. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Tom.
No, sorry, Chair. I was going to suggest that if committee would find it useful to make a recommendation as part of considering this report to Cabinet, that we introduce some kind of prioritisation within the tracker, would be really happy to do that. As you say, there are a number of them being managed. I declare an interest that lots of them have got my name on it, so that kind of prioritisation would be really useful. So I don't mind doing that at all.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Councillor Goodjohn?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to point out, first of all, I'd like to say that the work that was done 2 years ago now by Audit Wales regarding scrutiny committees, that work has now starting to bear fruit, because it's really being seen in scrutiny committees, the work that has been done, and the understanding of why that was important to new members has now been seen, and as I believe the report says, it being taken as business as usual to consider what is the most effective way of scrutinising is starting to really be taken on board. So I'm really looking forward to new innovative ways that we can use scrutiny, and I think there's been some really good work come out of that. I did want to ask Andrew if they'd be happy to regarding the WHQS and contact One Veil, because I know this has been an ongoing issue for a while now, and I've had casework from residents who have suffered from the poor communication that's come from the ICT upgrade, which has led to long waiting times. So can I ask, when do we think that the tenants portal will be opened, and do we know now what has caused the delays? Do we know what's been the main issues with the ICT, and do we have any kind of idea as to when this will be up and running, business as usual?
Andrew?
Sorry, Chair, I think he's actually left the call. I'll try and call him back in now.
All right. If not, Tom, can you take that back? I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll get an update circulated if Andrew's not available this evening. I'll get that circulated to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's useful because obviously the target date is April 24, and the date of the last update was 23. There's nothing in the narrative, and it would be useful, because there's still another, whatever, 6 months to go. So I think Councillor Goodjohn's point is a good one, because otherwise we could be waiting till April 24 and nothing happens. Okay. Is there any other questions, anyone? Any comments? Tom, the only comment I'd make is there any need for us to have the completed national regulatory actions and the local completed regulatory actions in the document?
Once they're completed, Chair, or once as officers we consider them to be completed, we report them as part of this process. If your committee agree and the individual scrutiny committees that are responsible agree that they're completed, that goes on to Cabinet. Once Cabinet have considered that, they will then drop off. But it in effect is just closing the loop.
Okay. Because obviously some of these are sort of 4-year-old now, 2019, 2020. And obviously, I should imagine there will be updates, but that I would imagine is part of normal business if they've been actioned appropriately and someone's monitoring and reviewing them. Okay. Councillor Prothero?
It's quite a general comment, really, to do with the actions and the recommendations with rural communities, and I guess it's the need, and one of them is Phil Chappell. It's not you, Tom, but if we think that places like Lantwick Major are the rural Vale, well, they're not. They're towns. They still are towns. So if we are delivering services when we're talking about hubs, and it's GVS and Lantwick, or it's not serving the rural Vale, that's all. And I know we have to think differently to try and deliver equitable services, but still, I don't think we're there yet, that's all.
Okay, thanks for
you.
the comment. Any other comments, anyone? No, if we go to the recommendations then, that I presume we note the progress to date in addressing the existing recommendations and improvement proposals made by the external regulators, and that we comment to Cabinet in regards to consideration be given to the introducing prioritisation in the tracker. I think that's what member was fairly happy with. If members are happy with that, someone prepared to move the recommendation? Thank you, Matthew. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Goodjohn, thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you very much for that. We then go on to the call-in following the internal audit recommendations, not yet fully implemented. Item number 8. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this report. So it's in terms of the the work that the Governance and Audit Committee does. The internal audit team from time to time support it to undertake its core functions of governance, and hopefully to provide it with some confidence in the financial governance of the authority. On the back of one of the internal audit reports at your September meeting, the recommendation monitoring report, members of the committee required further assurances from the respective directors that appropriate action was being taken to address internal audit recommendations that had been agreed from 21-22 audit reports, but had, as at the time, September 2023, had not yet been fully implemented. So this evening, we've invited the Director of Social Services and the Director of Corporate Services along to hopefully provide you with assurances that action has been taken or is likely to be taken in the near future. If I could just refer members to Appendix A and the action chart that we have, the action plan. Chair, are you happy for me to just go through them one by one? So then,
yeah.
So the first point is in relation to corporate safeguarding, and Lance is here to respond. So we've talked about the recommendation where the safeguarding service outcomes maintain a record of all staff that have attended the level 1 safeguarding training in person going forward. There was an agreed action, and hopefully Lance can provide us with an update of where we are as of today, please.
Yeah, sorry,
Lance. Sorry.
Yes, I'm pleased to be able to advise that that action is now complete. It's a very simple sounding action. It's actually a lot of steps that are required to actually implement it, but staff are required to complete that training on the council's IDEV system, and that is monitored, and that will be reported to the corporate safeguarding group.
Thank you for that, Lance. I think the only comment I'd make there is it may, whilst I understand the complexity of it, the recommendation, the final report was in August 2021. There was an agreed date of April 2022 to implement it, and we're now in October 23. So that was the concern, is that obviously it's nearly 2.5 years since the recommendation, since the report being delivered to the directorate, and it was the lack of action in sort of processing that point that I believe is the concern of committee, and obviously there may be some questions on that when we come to it. Andrew, next point on it. There's one other issue, wasn't there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lance. Next item is cybersecurity, and there were 2 recommendations made, and we've got Tom here this evening to go through those for us. First one was council-wide training in cyber resilience is to be introduced for all staff. And secondly, the council is to document the plans in place outlining the actions which help it to remain cyber resilient. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Andrew. So in terms of the first point, the latest position, Chair, is that that's been partially completed now. The training on cyber security, we've started to deploy on a risk assessed basis. So a training module called Cyber Ninjas has been deployed within ICT services. They're clearly one of the most important services within the organisation to prioritise for this particular training. So that's underway. The module is also available to all elected members under the Welsh Government's Cyber Resilience Scheme, and we'll be doing some work to publicise completion of that particular module in the coming weeks. We also met as an Information Governance Board in the last couple of weeks to look at a proposal as to how we can roll out the training more broadly, again following a risk-assessed basis, starting with colleagues in Lance's directorate, for example, and we've agreed the funding for that cybersecurity training as part of the current year's budget now. So work to implement that training will commence very shortly. In terms of this, the second point around the documentation of the cyber strategy, that has been drafted. I reviewed that recently, and it's going to be presented to the next meeting of the Information Governance Board as part of the consultation and commenting stage of that strategy. It'll then make its way to the strategic leadership team, and if we feel that it's necessary to get political approval for, through the cabinet process as well. So work is underway on that one as well.
Thanks, Tom. Obviously, it's the same comments as I said to Lance. It's the delay in it happening is the issue, but I'm sure there may be some questions. Are there any questions, members? Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, regarding the cyber resilience one in particular, given the fact that it's sort of widely recognised, I think the latest stat is 74% of all cyber incidents are in some way related to a human action, whether that be a staff member or doing something by accident or potentially on purpose. I just wondered, is there any compensating controls that I agree that, you know, it's great to have a fully fledged training program and have something that's amazing and it's brilliantly developed and it looks really pretty and everything else, but at the end of the day, actually just giving people some simple tips and tricks and just awareness raising actually covers off a lot of the risk. So I just wonder whether A, there's anything else that has been done in the meantime that would actually reduce this risk, or B, when responding to this sort of recommendation in the future, if you're going to take this long to create, sorry, not you, but if it's going to take this long to create such a training program, whether something simpler and quicker could be implemented to reduce that immediate risk rather than trying to wait 2 years to then cover it off, because what happens in that meantime? That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. Yes, absolutely. We've continued to communicate some of those kind of hints and tips in terms of cybersecurity. So promoting messages around the importance of double checking when invitations are being sent out, for example, looking at email addresses. We've also, as an IT team, introduced some functionality in 365 to act as a kind of gatekeeper. So our emails now indicate if something's going to go outside of the organisation, for example. So hitting both cybersecurity and also data protection and data breaches as well. And there's been a big campaign around raising awareness of all of those things. So the training then will come on the back of it to be a bit more focused and targeted specifically at the actions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, anyone? Any comments? Councillor Hooper?
I just want to reiterate the point. I think the dogs again want to, sorry about this. Reiterate the point that you made, Gareth, about this being, when we called for this being an important consideration, that they come to this committee with these views, because I think it highlights that we are taking this seriously. So I think this is something to be considered as almost a standard item. So when items become overdue, that they come to this committee. What that time period is, I think, is to be considered. And just another thought, we just had a paper that identified the responsible officer, and they named the responsible officer in this, and I think that helps. And this isn't a finger pointing exercise, but what it does do is that it makes sure that people realise that individual people have responsibility for some of these things as well. So I just wonder whether that could be or should be put onto the report as well. But I think it's great that it's on here, really important.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hooper. Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is a summary of our work in terms of recommendations that we've made over the years. When we do the action plan for the individual report, then there is a date set in terms of when the action will be implemented, but there's also a responsible officer named in the action plan. But that's just sent to the service manager in our final report, not included in our summary. If you feel as a committee you want that named individual to be included in these reports, we can accommodate that.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any other comments, anyone? No, the only comment I'd make, I think that's quite useful, and I'm not for dragging directors in whilst they may be responsible for the service, they're not necessarily accountable for what's done underneath. And on lots of issues in different authorities where I am at, I normally call in the head of service who's responsible, the responsible officer for undertaking the piece of work, and the director if it's required, because whilst Lance and Tom are taking the questions and the comments this evening, they will need to cascade that down to the appropriate officers, and people need to take accountability and responsibility for what they undertake within the authority. So, you know, this isn't a whipping exercise. This is just saying these things are important. They need to be done, and please do them, you know, in a timely manner. So that's the only comment I'd make. We've got some recommendations then before us. I think the recommendation is that committee note the assurances from the respective directors regarding the actions being taken to address the internal audit recommendations made in 2021-22, which have not yet been fully implemented. And I put another recommendation here that the director bring a paper to this committee on the 5th of February 2024 to give the most up-to-date position and confirm whether or not this matter can be signed off. Someone prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Good. John, anyone against? No, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Lance, for coming along. But clearly you get the understanding. So, you know, the final paper in February 24, hopefully everything has been put in place and we can just move this issue on. But thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the forward work programme. Item 9. Hi, Joan.
Hi, thank you. Hello, I'm Joan Davis, Deputy Head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Agenda item 9 is the updated forward work programme for this committee. It's a standard report you're used to seeing. Please note that the next meeting is the special meeting that's been put in on the 16th of November, and that's to receive the audited statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. If you take note at Appendix A, that has been updated to reflect that additional meeting, and also been updated to reflect decisions that have been made in previous meetings, such as next time the annual report from the committee is due to be tabled next time. So basically the recommendation is that members of the committee are asked to endorse the schedule items for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Hooper. You're on mute.
I've tried to stop the dog from barking. It was probably more of a question, and I don't know whether, Joan, whether this fits into this report or not. But at the, I don't know, it was the last committee, the one before that, we referenced the fact of the skills needs of committee members on this committee, and I noticed that it feels like we did the work. We highlighted there were some issues. We also highlighted, and I think Councillor Goodjohn brought it up well at the meeting when we discussed it, saying actually we need to find ways to make sure that people contribute in meetings and feel that they can contribute in meetings. And I don't see that in our forward work programme. And I don't know how you put it in there. It's probably one for the other Gareth to think about in terms of how we work it in. But it'd be a shame to miss it, I think, because it was something that we were all very honest in what our skills deficiencies or needs were, and just feels a bit, where is it going? Thank you, Joan.
Thanks, Cooper.
Okay.
Joan,
there is.
John, I was just going to suggest perhaps it's not an agenda item, but an item where we need to identify those training needs for members or ideas for members to put forward for training or whatever, and then they're set up as a separate training session, which is not a formal committee meeting, but as a training session. Maybe that's the way to deal with it, Councillor Hooper. But, you know, it maybe needs to go on 6 monthly as a sort of an item, just to say, you know, identify training needs of committee if there are any, you know, so so something like that. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we've included it within the work programme as Governance and Audit Committee self-assessment, which is coming out into March 24. So it's maybe a misunderstanding in terms of wording. We can change that and reflect to demonstrate its training and self-assessment.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Is there any other questions or comments? Just two from me, Joan. Firstly, we'll need to include both directors to come back to committee on the 5th of February 2024, looking at safeguarding and the cyber issues which they need to address. And just the other thing for members, because hopefully members don't think we've forgotten about it, there is a report to come back to you on Stanwell. I know there's a tremendous amount of work ongoing at the moment on Stanwell, and that may actually feature in a report within the next couple of months. But there are some matters which Audit are currently looking at the moment, which will involve other partners. So if you can bear that in mind, it hasn't been forgotten, given all the press that's been raised about it, and it will come back to you for consideration in due course, given the points that have been raised previously and the concerns that have been expressed. So just keep a weathered eye on the agendas coming forward. That's just for members' information. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, the recommendation is that we note and endorse the Forward Work Programme. So I'm prepared to move, please. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, for seconding. And Councillor Prothero, thank you for thirding it. So anyone against? No, that's it. Thank you very much. Item 10 on the agenda is any other items which the Chair has decided are urgent. Under Part 1, there are none. Part 2, there are no exempt or confidential reports. So can I just say thank you all for attending, for the quality of questioning and comments made and the debate that's been had, and see you on the 16th of November. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.